So first thing I want to do is thank everybody who has come before us. One of my mantras is building foundations as a good part of strategy. And congratulations to Pat and Allison and the team for building a really great foundation for this next panel to speak about strategy. And thank you so much to Pam and Paco and to Alice and the team here for mentioning already how important outreach is and how important partnerships are, because that's what my talented panel is going to speak about, and building the foundation for that is really important. I just want a show of hands. How many here are filmmakers with films in progress? Wow. And how many have integrated their outreach plan, or at least have some sort of idea of what they're going to be doing with their film to distribute it once it's done? Wow. Okay, so my hope is by the end of this panel that you'll have some excellent examples of what has been done, what's in the process of being done, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and so that you can, next time we ask that question, all of you will raise your hand when asked about the distribution plan and the strategy that you have for getting your film out. So what we're going to do here is each person has their time to show a clip and to talk about their individual project. I'm going to have, in between each person, we're going to take 2 questions just so that we can keep it going and keep the interactiveness of this presentation going. And then at the end, we'll have time for conversation with everybody. So we're going to start. I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Lisa Smithline. You can read, as Alice said, I think you can all read. And so you can read our bios here. But I come into this industry, at least, from the commercial and television production side, doing that for many years. And I just recently came to the realization that what I did in my former career, which was working as an art director in television movies, was a kind of a predecessor to social issue filmmaking, in the sense that we did movies of the week that were about social issues, things like teenage alcoholism and spousal abuse. And we would have 800 numbers afterwards to give people an opportunity to find a way to help themselves. And it just occurred to me recently that when I started working with Robert Greenwald and Brave New Films, and we were creating campaigns, that it really wasn't that much different from what we had done when we did television movies. We were still talking, using film as a medium to talk about issues that were either difficult issues or important or impactful issues, and then giving people the opportunity to think about them and to take action on them. So I haven't come very far, as it turns out, at least as far as I thought. So I'm going to start right now by introducing Patrice O'Neill. And Patrice, I think you can read her bio. So all I want to say right now is that I'm incredibly honored to be sitting next to her. Her accomplishments are incredible. The example she has of not only making important media, but engaging campaigns, engaging communities, and really changing the way that they behave and changing situations that are incredibly difficult is just inspiring to me. So please read her bio, because I think that I'd like to give her as much time as possible to speak about her projects.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. And I think I have a sense of who's in this room and the kind of conversation we can have. And I'm really looking forward to that. And many thanks to Pat, who's a mentor, and to the incredible people who put on this conference. It's, to me, the best place to have this kind of deep discussion. So I'm not going to do my usual rap that I do about Not in Our Town, because I think some of the stuff is a given. In case you don't know, Not in Our Town is a project that we started in 1995. It was based on a film, a little short, simple film we did about how people in Billings, Montana resisted hate violence. And so since that time, we've been following communities around the country who've been using Not in Our Town to start discussions about how they can address intolerance and build inclusion in their own communities. But just because I have this podium, I have to say to you, I Google hate crimes, and I look at them every day, and I think we are in a very, very dangerous and dark period, my friends. I have not witnessed this kind of thinly veiled racism, very thinly veiled, searingly dangerous political division in my adult lifetime. And I think if you're not seeing it, you're probably not paying attention. I remember I saw this quote recently by Desmond Tutu. He says, "Hope is being able to see there is light despite all the darkness." And I think that's what Not in Our Town is about. We have to look for and highlight not just the danger, but the action that is necessary and possible. And that's what we try to do with Not in Our Town. So I want to start by just showing a little brief clip of, it's a preview to the next film that we're working on for PBS, Not in Our Town 3. It doesn't have a title yet because we rejected the old one. Anyway, so it's just, please indulge us for, I think it's like 3.5 minutes. So I want to, this panel's about strategic from the start. And so I think we could talk about the Not in Our Town strategy. I've talked about that for a while and sort of outreach as we know it. I think what we know is outreach. I think that's embedded. I think we've done that for a long time. I want to talk about the term and maybe change it up a little and talk about a different term. I don't think that I would say that we just do outreach for our films. I think we make films and create media that we think can encourage dialogue and action in communities, that can help people make change by seeing how others have done it. So it's a story that builds on itself. I think collaboration is a good word to use, and talking about that as a strategy. We obviously have key collaborators facing history. I think PBS is so important. We want our films to be on television. I think obviously that's changed. There's a new way to present it to audiences, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I want to talk about a few things that we've learned about filmmaking from the start and what we do to try to encourage that. I think it's embedded in our original story in Billings. So the thing that happens in Billings, there are many things that lead up to it. A whole series of attacks against a broad cross-section of people in the town, but the culminating story is a 6-year-old boy has a menorah in his window for Hanukkah. A brick is thrown through the window and lands on his bed, and people in the town say, we have to do something. And so in act of solidarity, they start making these paper menorahs and putting them in their windows. And then everybody in the town, the dry cleaner does something, the local newspaper does something, and 10,000 people put menorahs in their windows, and they all find a way to take action. That's collaboration. That's cross-constituency, practical joint action that can create change, that can change an atmosphere in a town. So the challenge is to take what's on the screen and put it into practice on a larger scale in the real world. So I want to talk about some key things that we've learned from that story, from what communities have done around the country, and then how we try to take those lessons and what they have taught us into thinking about, what our films would be like. Because, so for example, this film, we've been seeing, anti-immigrant action for a long time, but we didn't have specifically a Not in Our Town story, a story about what a community was doing about it, how a community was trying to respond and take action, until we found Patchogue. So our perspective is about positive action. There are many ways you could cover the story of what happened there. Ours is about what are people trying to do about it. I think our stories are told by a chorus of characters, so we don't just necessarily follow one person through a long period of time in great detail. It's told by a chorus. It's told by a whole community, again, because the idea is what can we do together? I won't unpack all of this. Diversity is inherent. It is part of, who is going to fight head? Who's going to stand up to intolerance? But it is, I think, what we absolutely, essentially have to do if we want to show what is possible to do together. And I also mean diversity in another sense, because you're looking at, a cross-section of the community. So you have to make sure that you get representation from all different points of view and the people who can actually create institutional change in your town. Discomfort is part of the landscape. I think that's something that we really try to emphasize. And accessibility, our films, we try to make them really accessible. I look at the really big, beautiful pictures that Paco and Pam were showing. I think, we just really do something different, But I think change takes place in small moments. So for us, I think that's one of the things we try to capture. So that's part of the films, but I think it translates into what we do in terms of social networking, social outreach. We just had this incredible opportunity with the BAVAC Producers Institute, the first institute. I hope all of you know about it. If you don't, you should check it out. To build a social networking site for people around the country to use Not in Our Town. And can we show the site, a little bit about the site? And we have, I think, a variety of tools that you can use. One of the first things that we did was built a map because we wanted to see, not the red dots show you where hate crimes are happening, but that wasn't the point because I think, Southern Poverty Law Center does a good job of that. We wanted people to be able to show change. So the green dots are where people are taking action. You have to earn a green dot. You have to do something. You have to take action in order to earn a green dot because we want the red dots to be overwhelmed. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, those are all things that we found early on. It's like, oh, you want to push people to the site. Well, we want Not in Our Town to be ubiquitous. It's all over the place. It's like, if people access it on Facebook, fine. It can drive them to the assets on the site, or Twitter, or YouTube. I think, there are about 35 original films on the site, on the video section, and we tried to do short original films that people could download and take into any meeting, throw it up on a projector, and just use whatever's happening in your town. If it's anti-immigrant violence, if it's racist violence, if the police are attacking, whatever. You're going to be able to look and find a film that might work in your community and download it. But I think, we've had some success. Some of the films have really done well, and one of them was really amazing to us. We did this story about gun high school students who, when Westboro Baptist Church, that Fred Phelps hate group that comes and protests God hates fags. I don't know what else to say. It's just like it's the most reprehensible thing. These students in this school that we had worked in for about 6 years said, I know you want us to remain silent. I know you don't want us to confront them, but we want to do something. So we did this short little video about their actions and how they gathered their parents and their teachers and did this musical response to this group. And we put up this video, and I sent a note out. I go, wow. It's been out for 2 days and 3,000 people have seen it. Within 2 weeks, almost 200,000 people had used it. And it was like Facebook. It's like, it just exploded. But I think it had something that's really important to us. It was a positive story. It wasn't about Fred Phelps. It was about these kids taking action. It was about them doing something together. There wasn't a single character. It was about all of them. So we really learned a lot from that. My husband paints, and he comes up from the basement, sometimes, and I go, what are you painting? And he says, well, with painting, you're always painting yourself. And I go, oh. Right. So I think with Not in Our Town, we're painting a mural. We're painting a mural, and people around the country are painting this mural together. And I think we're always trying to paint our better selves. Who are our better selves? And where's our better town? Where's our better country? And I hope you'll join us in that endeavor, in painting this big mural.
Thank you. First thing I want to say is this is a really good example of storytelling with impact and using popular culture, using the tools that we have, and taking the relationships that you built early on, building a strategy around it, and then engaging people, giving people a tool so that not only are they able to look at a situation in your last example of the students, but create positive change using these tools is just remarkable. And so I just want to now know if I'm going to take 2 questions right now. As I mentioned, we'll talk more afterwards. But do we have some questions here that we want to ask Patrice? And I can't see anything well, so excellent. Thank you.
Just a quick question in terms of how viral the film went on the Fred Phelps piece. Do you count that just to the outreach of Facebook? Was it because people were familiar with your site, or were they coming in from elsewhere? In other words, where did the viral nature of that come from?
It was our Facebook site and others, and then people started spreading it. I think we got a big bump. We hit 100,000, and Ellen DeGeneres tweeted us. That really helped. So, right? So, it wasn't, there was no publicity on this. This was all social media spread.
For us social media folks, I mean, the show on television, I'm sure you've heard this parallel before, but Extreme Makeovers. I mean, in fact, you're doing it, you're showing communities made over based on an issue. It seems so strong. And have you ever thought about, has the networks ever approached you about this perhaps being something that would get a bigger audience from network television as opposed to PBS? Or is your production cycle too long to make? It's such a good idea and it's so beautiful. I don't know. That's my question.
I'm terrified about what they would do with these stories, honestly, because there's a lot of edge to them and there is discomfort. And I mean, I think, there's a danger of making it too scary or too soft. And I think we try to sort of combine that. And I feel really honored to be part of the public television community, honestly, because I think people have we can complain about it and whatever, but there's this sort of trust about what public media means, and I think this is public media, and I feel really strongly about that and want to keep that in that realm. I of course miss that huge audience, because I think it is something that a large audience could get, and we're always trying to think about how to make it more accessible. Thank you.
Actually, thank you for that. That's part of the conversation I want to have afterwards about the various different kinds of releases. We're not representing here theatrical, and it's something that I've had experience with. So I also want to present that as another alternative. I know that for many people, the theatrical aspect is not accessible, but and/or not desirable, because as was mentioned earlier and just now, that we lose a lot, especially in the freedom, the editorial freedom. But we do gain a lot in the sense of reaching more people. So I do want to have that as part of the conversation. So thank you. So now we have Meg here, who is got a little bit of a different story. Her film was, what was it, 2 years ago now that you completed? First in 08, and I'm really happy to say that she's still going strong with her film. And this is an example of a film that not only had a strong strategy and a strong story, but one that kept developing and evolving as it went on. And so Meg's going to speak about that and how she's been open to different opportunities as the film has reached different audiences.
Great. Thank you. I want to thank Pat and Allison and everyone at the Center for organizing this event and inviting me here. And also want to acknowledge Daria Summers, the co-director of Lioness, who's not here today. I also want to acknowledge our funders, our outreach funders. We raised about $100,000 from Fledgling, Chicken and Egg, Rockefeller Family, and Associates in NISCA. Without that support, we wouldn't have been able to do any of this work. We are also supported by ITVS and Independent Lens. We were part of their community cinema program, and we have had ongoing effects in terms of our work on Capitol Hill was also supported by ITVS. So those from the get-go have been really important partnerships for us. Lioness tells a story of a group of women who went over to Iraq, servicewomen who went over to Iraq as cooks, mechanics, heavy equipment operators, came back as part of this country's first official generation of female combat veterans. The women in question were based in the Sunni Triangle town of Ramadi, and in addition to their regular day jobs, they were sent out on missions with all-male units in order to deal with the Iraqi women and children that the combat units were encountering in their raids at night. And in the process of doing this, they were drawn into some of the heaviest fighting in 2004. And when we started this project in 2005, we knew that this expansion of women's roles was taking place, but it was very much under the radar. The mainstream press and the alternative press, neither were covering this issue, but we knew that it would emerge eventually as nationally consequential. We knew that these folks were going to be coming back and were going to need help. So our goal in making the film was to draw attention to this situation and also to then make sure that when the women come back, society understands what they've been doing, because it has the official policy is that women are not allowed to be assigned to units whose primary mission is direct ground combat. So as a consequence, this is not recorded in their military, their DD-214 forms, what they call them. And so when they come back, they have often encountered caregivers at the VA and elsewhere who just don't understand what they've been through. We wanted to highlight this issue and the other issue of keeping them in this sort of gray zone where they're out ahead of official policy in terms of the reality of what they're doing on the ground in Iraq, is also training, because they're not allowed to be trained in combat arms units, because that's against official policy. So then they're kind of doubly in danger. And then, like I said, when they come back, they have encountered a lot of disbelief about what they've been asked to do. So I just want to show this trailer, and then I'll talk a bit about how we handled the outreach. Thank you. So since its release in 2008, the film has contributed significantly to the mainstreaming of the movement to recognize and respond to the needs of American servicewomen returning from Iraq and Afghanistan. The film has had tangible impact in a number of arenas, and I just want to mention these quickly. It's played a critical role in activating a discussion around policy between lawmakers and DoD. And it has influenced some legislation, particularly the bill that Obama signed into law last week on veteran health care. There was a piece of that legislation that we worked with Senator Patty Murray on and did a press conference and did some behind-the-scenes work with the women. We connected the women to her office. And so that was passed and signed into law last week. The film has also been adopted as a tool within the VA's national healthcare infrastructure, both the medical centers across the country and in the vet centers. And it's currently being used in an innovative healthcare education training program, a pilot program in North Carolina for non-VA rural healthcare providers who are often the first point of contact for veterans coming back from these wars. They often do not live in areas near VA facilities, and so they often are coming into just their local primary care person who often isn't familiar with what their needs are and what they've been through. And I can say more about that during the Q&A. In terms of how we approached our outreach, we think about it in terms of process informed by strategy. The editorial decisions that we made in making the film, I think, affected our ability to build strategic partnerships. The film is not structured around an argument about whether or not the women were in combat. They were. That was our starting point. That was a given. And it was not structured around an argument over the legitimacy of the war. There were other filmmakers doing that work at the time, and we did not, in a way, want to preach to the choir. We wanted to try to go beyond it and to reach different audiences. And so we were really interested in focusing on the human consequences of the war for these women. And our approach to the subject was based on a view that the military is a major public institution in this country, and it requires public understanding and oversight. And without this understanding, the national conversation about the wars, I think, is impoverished. So for us, we found that our ability to gain access to our subjects, some of whom were active duty and some were veterans, came from an attitude of discovery. We really went in there with a sense of trying to understand the logic of their world and the choices they had made. And we did not assume that we knew what life was like for them. And I think that that approach helped to convince them to work with us. The other thing is that we did not approach them, we did not think of them as victims. We were very interested in their competence. And when they started to understand that, we kept going back and kept showing up, and they kept saying, well, is this going to be on CNN tomorrow, or when's this going to be on? And we kept coming back and getting to know them better and trying to film their daily lives. We felt that was an important way to tell the story, to really focus on their daily lives. And in so doing, be able to see the sort of way they were struggling with the repercussions of what they had been asked to do in Iraq. I think they really began to understand that we had a different attitude, and that opened doors for us. So in that sense, we structured the narrative in a way that invited diverse audiences and multiple audiences into the story. And as a result, it really allowed us to extend the film out into networks that we could not have anticipated, that we didn't know about when we started the film. We have definitely been able to reach our core audience of military, members of the military, their families, veterans, veteran providers at the VA, and military healthcare providers. But we've also reached others as well. And by framing the film as a gender equity issue, that also appealed to people on the other side of the political spectrum who care about these issues. And we have started to have contact with women in law, labor, Department of Labor, all sorts of interesting spaces that are learning about the film. In terms of the partnerships that we developed, for us the challenge was we were not really able to work with the NGO sector. That wasn't really where we were, the space we were in. We were working with the Center for Women Veterans at the VA, and we were working with Disabled American Veterans, which is a veteran service organization, and ITVS, and the network of women veteran program managers who run each women veteran program at the VA in each state. And there's this kind of latent network of people that we got to know, and they have been very helpful in embracing the film and doing lots of screenings. And we also have been, as I said, worked with staffers on Capitol Hill, both on the House Armed Services Committee and the House Veteran Affairs Committee, and we had a screening there, and we worked very closely with Senator Murray's office and Susan Davis and her staff. One of the things that I would say in terms of working in this kind of way with this particular group of people and of organizations, face-to-face meetings was really important, and bringing the women to some of the meetings before some of these partners had even seen the film. The women were, the first time they met us, they also were meeting the women. And this was often a generation of women who staffed some of these organizations who had been nurses in Vietnam. And so they were a slightly older generation, and they were very determined to not let what happened to them happen to this next generation of women. So they valued, maybe more than social media networking, they valued sort of the face-to-face. That seemed very important. In terms of, so we went to a lot of their conferences. They had a big national summit on healthcare that we went to. We tried to basically insert ourselves in these conferences, and once we got in front of one of the big national came back, the VA would not be able to give them their disability benefits based on their combat service connection. So they were caught in this no man's land. And that was not something we knew about when we started the film, but we learned about that through our partnerships, and that's part of what the DoD report that the House just asked them to do a report. So DoD has just finished a report on how they have been using women in Iraq and Afghanistan. Finally, I'm probably running out of time, but I wanted to say that as we implemented this outreach strategy, our partners became our distribution partners, because we were selling off our website, and we would sell community use versions to the VA folks and the vet center folks. And in fact, for the vet center folks, we offered a clinician's discount. And then we were selling educational at the moment off our site. And so when the military folks, like Travis Air Force Base, contacts us and wants to do a screening, they purchase an educational version which has public performance rights. So we've been doing that off of our website, and we sold a lot of copies to the VA, and they bought them at the community use price, which is $195. So through these partnerships, we've actually been able to stay afloat financially. And the other thing that we've been doing is we're just starting now to break the film into shorter clips, which are being used as modules in a curriculum in North Carolina, sort of pilot program, which is which is dedicated to getting the issue of what women coming back are facing in front of these local primary care doctors. So we're kind of at the beginning stages of figuring out how to do that, because now other states have expressed an interest in making this, in getting this material. So we're trying to figure out what's the best model for us to both make it available to them, but also, you know, some kind of licensing strategy that will work for everyone. So in that sense, I guess one of my main takeaways is to try to embed your film in major institutions that service the audience that you want to reach and that are your kind of end users. And that is a point we talked about at dinner last night, and it's exactly what we have, I think, been able to do. The other issue comes back to what we were talking about in terms of credibility. For us, this was really important to be credible, to be taken as credible in dealing with our subjects at all the different levels of involvement, and then when we conducted ourselves in a certain way, it distinguished us from the mainstream press, and that really paid dividends in many ways. That's not why we were doing it, but we realized over time that our approach was paying off in terms of how we were handling and relating to our subjects. Finally, we tried to be very flexible in terms of our opportunities, which Lisa mentioned, and our funders were really wonderful. When we understood something had come up, then we would go to them and say, you know, there's this summit and we don't have enough money to bring all the women to DC, but we know if we get in front of all these people, this will pay off for us. And so they went out of cycle and funded that, and that happened with a few funders. So we were very alert and constantly trying to understand what in a kind of ethnographic sense, what the lay of the land was and where the opportunities were, because this was all new to us, and it paid off. Thank you.
We're going to take a couple questions again. So thank you, Meg. And I just want to underscore again one of the points that, of the many excellent points that Meg made, and that was about her editorial decisions early on in the making of the film with a conscious and strategic design looking at what her distribution goals were. And I think that's something that I want to tease out a little bit more later, because the decisions that you make then when you're, and oftentimes projects that I've worked on, we make them before we've shot one frame of film, knowing full well that those are going to very strongly impact and hopefully influence in a positive way the distribution of our films. So that's something that I hope that you'll really take into account as you're producing and progressing with your films. So again, if we could have just a couple questions. Again, don't get nervous. We're going to have plenty of time for conversation.
Hi, my question is about access. Right over here?
Oh, hi, yeah.
Hi. Since the military is saying that women are not going into combat, why were you allowed to follow them into combat? And how did you get them to cooperate, not just with you in the making of the film, but also in the distribution, right, when much of what you're saying in the film is contrary to their stated goals?
Right. Well, when we started the film in 2005, you know, it was a very dark period in the country, and I think there was a lot of nervousness about you know, what was happening politically. So when we started, there was a lot of concern, and when we wrote a letter to the film department at the Department of Public Affairs, the film office in LA. And we wrote a letter describing what we wanted to do, and we gave them our biographies. And about 5 months later, they replied and said, okay, so who do you want to talk to? And we fortunately knew the names of the women and the names of the commanders of this particular unit. And so we gave them the names, and then they facilitated our visit. The first visit when we went out to Fort Riley, and we met a bunch of the women in the film who had served together and had come back, redeployed back to Fort Riley, and you know, they were nervous, but they were, I think they really, you know, their job is to is to let you go and talk to people. If you have a project and they vet it, then they will facilitate it. And we had a good experience everywhere that we went. They were professional and they let us do what we wanted. There were occasions when people were wondering about. There was one occasion when someone wondered about a question that we asked. But the women themselves were able to talk about their experiences. You can talk about your own experiences. What you can't do if you're active duty is say, well, my opinion about the war is this. You can't opine about the policy. Then you'll lose your job. You'll get in trouble. So we didn't ask them that. We just asked them for their stories. And then of course, now we're in a very different moment, and so the Department of Defense recognizes and acknowledges that women are in combat, and so this policy discussion has now moved to the point where it's openly acknowledged. In this report that they just sent to the House Armed Services Committee outlines how they're using women, and we could parse it, and they could say more and be more forthcoming, but basically it's a known fact and it's acknowledged now. So it's actually changed over time. And in fact, now I think what they're finding is this is a really helpful tool, because we have all these people coming back who are still active, but who are still, with multiple deployments, having a lot of problems. So now they want to work with us.
Did you go to Iraq or Afghanistan?
No.
Where did the footage come from?
Well, we got some footage from some people who were there, and then some of the footage was shot in Ramadi by news reporters during some of those fights. Mm-hmm.
Do we have another question for Meg now? I can't see. Okay, so I think we're going to go on to Debra. And Debra's in a different stage of her film. She has just completed it and is getting ready to get it out into the world. And she started her work with a goal of working with the people in the community to tell the story of their community and engage them in changing their own community. And so her story is a powerful one, and she's going to talk about it.
Hi. I just want to say thank you so much for having me here, Pat and Allison and everybody from the Center for Social Media. I've never been here before, so I just feel so honored to be in this group of dynamic people, and in particular filmmakers and media producers. So thank you. I have a PowerPoint to help me stay focused. So just, I'm sort of in a different genre of filmmaking. I run a youth organization in San Francisco. It's called Conscious Youth Media Crew. And I guess I'll use this thing. Or do I point it over there? Okay. So I just want to give you a little bit of background of where we started from, because our starting point is the community and is community outreach, really. And I really believe that youth are sort of like the key to the community. So if you can get in there with the youth, they just provide all these inroads into places that you might not have access to otherwise. So Conscious Youth Media Crew, in particular, we are a youth training program, and we train young people in media arts and digital video. Youth increase their experience with visual arts and filmmaking, practice creative self-expression, develop voice, gain technology skills, and also become involved in the community as media producers and young leaders. And one of our main goals is to really encourage dialogue about the issues that we cover. Who we serve in the community are young adults between the ages of 15 and 24 that come from local San Francisco neighborhoods, mostly the southeastern sector of San Francisco, but also Bay Area-wide, Oakland and Richmond. Most of our young people that we work with come from poor, low-income communities in San Francisco that qualify for the free and reduced lunch program. I say that because that's an indicator for the poverty level of the young people that we're working with. We also work with English and Spanish speakers. Most of our youth have limited access or none to technology and internet in the household. And of course, these are our bright young thinkers of today and tomorrow. So our first, our programs, usually we produce short films that are documentary in nature, and we like to say that they're in the verite style. But recently, we were able to produce our very first feature film, entirely youth-produced, and it tells the story of a young street hustler. I'm going to get this over here so I can read it at the same time. Excuse me. Oops. Tells the story of a young street hustler and his struggles to find a sense of purpose as he lives in a rapidly changing community facing the threat of evictions, gentrification, and environmental racism. And we're going to just show you the trailer really quick. Thank you. So a little background about the project. We were applied for a grant with the California Council for Humanities, and they had a project called the How I See It Digital Filmmakers Project. And we were awarded a grant for $30,000, and we were required to have matching funds. So at that time, I didn't really know how I was going to get the other $30,000. I thought maybe I'd sell my car, rent my place out or something, but we ended up able to pull the funds together from other grants and also individual donors, and of course, lots and lots of favors from the community. The focus of the project was how youth see their community and what does this reflect about California's social history. And the main question that was posed was, how are youth connected to or disconnected from their community? So there was a list of themes that we could choose from, and the themes that we chose to explore were civic engagement, intergenerational communications, and urban landscapes. In particular, we decided that we would locate the film in Bayview Hunters Point, especially because the youth that we work with, many of them live in Hunters Point, and we decided that because that neighborhood was going through so much change, that we would tell a story about the change that was going on in that community. And a lot of young people that live there were seeing change happen all around them with cranes and construction work, but they had no idea really what the larger implications of gentrification meant. And that, yes, they were going to tear down these projects, but what does that mean for what was going to happen to them after that happened? Were they going to come back and move into these condos? Probably not, because they were trying to inch everybody out. And in San Francisco, the Bayview Hunters Point is a predominantly low-income area in the southeastern part of the city, and it's plagued by violence, unemployment, and toxic waste. If you see stories covering the Bayview in the news, it's always usually about crime and violence and unemployment and despair. However, it's one of the city's last remaining African-American neighborhoods, and it's historically the neighborhood that has the highest rate of home ownership, not just by African-Americans, but by in any neighborhood in San Francisco. And so that's really sad, because a lot of homeowners are selling their homes and have sold them in the last 20 years, and especially now that the gentrification is happening and foreclosures, that's changing really quickly. This is also an area that has the sprawling views of San Francisco's beautiful skyline, and it also contains some of the most environmentally hazardous land in the city due to the industrial plants and the Hunters Point Naval Shipyard, which was declared a Superfund site in 1974. And due to that, there's many residents report the city's highest rates of cancer, asthma, and other related illnesses. The public housing projects they're around the perimeter of the shipyard. So they're trying to knock these down, build up condos, clean the shipyard, and put condos on the shipyard. So just a little background on the process. We developed a small leadership crew of 5 advanced youth filmmakers that had graduated from the Conscious Youth Media Crew programs, and they were ages 17 to 22. And then we contracted a cohort of guest artists, including our core artist in residence, filmmaker Sam Stiles, who's born and raised in Oakland and has a background in producing music videos, specifically hip hop and gospel, and social issue films like Black August. That was his film. So, as a group, the youth decided that when it came to audience, their target audience, they wanted to make a film that would speak to the younger generations and help really translate and break down what was going on in their neighborhood from a youth's point of view, peer-to-peer youth dialogue, to really be able to reach their peers. They wanted to tell a story that was raw and organic, and therefore we had to make choices about the language, about modes of expression, music, ways they would communicate with each other in the narrative, all to make sure that they would capture the attention of the young audience. And as far as purpose, the youth decided they wanted to share their real experiences, how young people experience the multi-layered complexity of changing urban landscapes on a real personal level. And something about that is, me as an adult, when we were writing the script, I would be like, are you serious? Are you sure? And they'd be like, that's the way we see it, Deb. And so it was like, I had to really honor their own kind of way of talking to each other and breaking it down, and also like certain things in the dialogue that like help them just keep it real, like keep it really on a youth voice, keep the youth voice real. So as far as the process of writing the story, this is really where the community involvement and engagement began, because we went into the community to find out what was really going on. We had to find out the facts and background. So the youth filmmakers were trained by, we had a humanities scholar that worked with us. Her name is Nancy Mirabal. She's a professor at San Francisco State who teaches oral history in the ethnic studies department. So she came and trained the youth on how to conduct interviews in the field. And so what we did was we went out and did some research to find out, the youth lived in the community. So and I've worked in the community for 20 years. So we really were starting from the community. And we went to the leaders and found some of the key players, and we interviewed them. And then we would take that information and bring it back into our own story writing sessions and weave it into our characters' lives and into the overall story arc. And through that, we were able to build really strong relationships. Through reaching into the community for information, we were able to connect these two generations or multiple generations, and also get their support and their blessing to be able to do the project. And I think that if we were outsiders from, another city perhaps that was coming in, we want to document this story, they might not have been as open. In fact, I know they wouldn't have been as open. This is very insulated neighborhoods that, I don't know if anybody knows where Bayview Hunters Point is. It's kind of like on the side of San Francisco. So like if you don't have to go there, you don't go there. Especially because, according to the, it's ridden with crime and violence and all this stuff. Although we know there's all these beautiful, bright young leaders in there. I think that, many community leaders are skeptical of outsiders. So that was really important to us. And then as far as the story goes, we wrote the script as it was based on the lives and experiences of the youth who either lived in or around the neighborhood, and then the research findings, again, were integrated into the storyline. So some of the community players that emerged, just to give you a sense of who some of our community partners were, and then we were also able to partner with the groups that they represented. Were Espanola Jackson, she's an 80, that's the voice that you hear in the beginning where she's talking about the boarded up houses. She's actually testifying at City Hall in that clip, and that was actually, I came home one day and they play the hearings on the radio, like on Thursdays or something, and I came home and I heard it on the radio and I was like, oh my God, how am I gonna record this? So I just like took out my camera and filmed the radio so we could get, that's why it sounds so bad. But it was just, when she's talking, she's just so heartfelt and passionate because this is like her world, right? And I mean, to go up in there and see the boarded up houses, like it hurts. Especially if you're a child and you live in a community where all the houses are boarded up. Like, what does that say about how the city feels about you, right? And then also Minister Christopher Mohammed, who I must honor and pay much respect to, who's the leader of the Nation of Islam in the Bayview. Also, the Nation of Islam is quite skeptical, especially of a white Jewish woman like myself. And so I was able to really, through my relationships in the community and having worked a little bit with the Nation over the last 20 years, but able to really, through our persistence and our commitment to the issue, really gain the trust of the Nation. In fact, when we first went, we had to get permission to film, and we still ask for permission to film because it's very political. But once we got their blessing, we were able to have so much more access that was really helpful in the film. And Francisco de la Costa, I mention these people because they're key players, and without them, we could never have made the film. He's an Asian Pacific Islander community leader. an elder and environmental activist. And these are people who have been working on this struggle for years. Marie Harrison, who works with an organization called Green Action, and they do environmental activism and organizing throughout the state of California, advocating for communities of color that are dealing with environmental justice issues. And finally, Alicia Schwartz, who represents Power, and she's also an environmental justice organizer and a strategist in the Bayview. And in the film, the main characters are making a documentary, and then something happens to one of the characters, and the other character has to come in and help finish the documentary. So within the film, there's this play on like documentary feature. So it's like a cast of characters, but they're making a documentary. So there's times where the film just cuts into Final Cut Pro or into the actual documentary interviews itself to help provide that information. As far as I think what makes what strengthen our community partnerships and our just community presence was the fact that these issues resonate in real life for the young people who made the film. These are the realities that they are facing growing up in San Francisco, where gentrification is displacing long-term residents. And the film is told from the point of view of 19-year-old D'Angelo, the main character, who must cope with turf wars, his job cleaning up a former shipyard polluted with toxic waste, and his family's eviction from public housing. And one of the screenwriters, Devin Melvin, who's 19, whose own personal story was incorporated into the film, says, "Our neighborhood is changing so fast." One of the young filmmakers, says Devin Melvin, 19, one of the young filmmakers, "It's happening in front of our eyes. Making this film helped me see how important it is to learn about your community's history before it's gone." For me, that's a really telling comment. So the project, again, resonated with what was happening around the youth, and they realized that their own personal lives were political and that they themselves were affected by the changes in the community. Community involvement. Once we discovered the real depth of the issues facing this community, we were hooked. Once you learn the truth and you connect the dots, there's no going back into the darkness. Empathy was key to our project's success. The subject matter mirrored the authentic lives of the filmmakers as young people facing the same realities that our characters faced. And this is just an example of youth telling their own story from their own viewpoint about an issue that directly impacted them on a personal level. We made a commitment to the issue. We were involved. We went to meetings, family gatherings, church, interviews, city hall, petition signings. We were fully invested in the issue and in the community. Once we proved our commitment to the issues in the community, we became solid partners in the efforts to understand the politics and the potential impacts around redevelopment. We involved neighborhood residents in the actual production of the film, many of whom were unaware or confused about the changes that were taking place in their neighborhood, but we cast many characters from the neighborhood itself. We used many local locations. We worked together with other people in the neighborhood to coordinate the locations. Just even getting to film in public housing was crazy because, you know, stuff's jumping off there all the time. And there was one time we were filming and one of the young people came over on his bike and said, "You guys should leave." Because there had just been a shooting the night before and young people were mourning the loss of their loved one, and you know, it's just out of respect, we packed up our stuff and left. But you can these kind of issues where we were able to work through because we had the community support, community members accepted us as partners versus as outsiders, and the genuine, mutually respectful relationships we formed allowed the film to be made. And this obviously requires time and sincere effort. And just lastly, some of the screenings that we've had to date, we just finished cutting the film down to 1 hour. It was previously an hour and a half. But our strategy is really, other than film festivals, because the youth decided that their target audience were also youth, our priority in the community, our priority screenings were really to show our film to high school students and in the community to other community organizations that were working around issues of environmental justice and redevelopment or gentrification, communities facing these same issues. So we were able to We showed the film last year at the LA Film Festival, and this year we just got into the Black Film Festival in San Francisco, and we also made it into the 2010 International Youth Film Festival in the UK. So we're really excited about that. But for me, and then also just wanted to include university campuses, because we've shown the film a couple times at the Geography Studies Department and also at the Urban Planning Department. And we've had community screenings at art galleries and other community theaters. And then just lastly, I know really quickly, is just challenges. Challenges that we've had is just what we'll talk about now is just distribution for a small nonprofit is a really big challenge. It takes time, know-how, and of course money to pay for it. So I really appreciate when Paco was talking about having a full staff person, like an actual allocated position for the distribution and marketing of a film, because it takes that much time and effort, and it's not something you can just add onto the side. And I think I will wrap it up with that. Thank you.
So we now have about 30 minutes, and I want to just ask a couple really quick questions, and then I want to invite people to ask their questions of the panelists. One of the things I want to focus on is I guess it's I don't know what you call it, paradox of filmmaker or advocate. And I ask my filmmakers that question all the time is, are you a filmmaker? Are you an advocate? Are you both? And where do you draw the line? And the reason I ask that question is because as important as it is to be involved and passionate about the issue that your film is highlighting, it's also important that you are using your film to highlight the work of others so that you can have a larger distribution. And so that's something that I encourage you to think about as you're working on your distribution plan and strategy. Oftentimes when I'm prepping filmmakers to go for interviews, to even when they're talking about funding, et cetera, is what is their plan and who are they partnering with? It's important to think about those things not just in the context of getting the film out, but also to really understand that the film's impact will be so much greater if you have an issue that others can work with and that they can use. And so that's something that I actually really focus on and want you all to think about as you're thinking about your strategies. I want to talk about a few other things. We've talked about throughout the day about funding. I haven't heard a lot, Meg mentioned a little bit about revenue streams. Not all people get funding, not all filmmakers are independently wealthy and have pockets full of money. And so one of the other challenges is generating revenues. And I know I heard you mention, Paco, that you ended up selling more DVDs when you gave it away for free. But I think that it's important also to think about how are you going to not only continue to fund your project, but continue to fund, as Patrice has mentioned, subsequent projects. And if you're lucky enough to get funding, that's great. If you're not, thinking about different ways to find funding streams. One of the great ways is by having a partnership with organizations who find your film important enough and that it's going to highlight the issues that they work on, and to work a funding relationship with them. And then selling DVDs at festivals, et cetera, is a terrific way to do that as well. So I want to invite people to come up and ask questions of our panelists.
Yes, I'm Arthur Kanagas with One Films, and I'm very interested in the work, Lisa, that you're doing with Brave New Films. I was involved in kind of pioneering living room-based organizing of films back during the Vietnam War, when before there was home video, we created slideshows, the automated air war that was used very widely in organizing around the country and with GIs too. I'd be very interested in hearing more about that whole move-on approach, the whole work you're doing with that kind of living room-based organizing, both at Focus Features and Brave New Films.
Well, full disclosure, I was a founding partner of Brave New Films, but I left there a couple years ago, and I'm now doing a similar yet different approach with filmmakers as an independent. But what we did basically, and this is actually a good way to talk about the changing landscape and changing market. When we started the Brave New Films, we basically took social issue films and said we were going to made the decision to bypass theaters and to put the film directly into the hands of people because our goal was to use film as a resource for change. It was not to create revenue, it was not to do anything other than to create a resource that people could use. And so we decided that community-based screenings and/or house parties was really the way to go with that, to give people not only a tool to raise awareness in their communities, but then to able to engage people in action, and then tie directly with organizations who were working on the issues that the films highlighted. And so it was an alternative approach, one that was based on a lot of different models from the past, including what you're speaking about during the Vietnam War, protests, et cetera. And so we partnered with organizations. We really had no idea if it was going to work or not. Our primary goal was that we would show a film and have an action associated with it, knowing that people would then come back for more. You know, if they felt empowered, then they would come back for more. And we got lucky in that a couple of our films, Move On was working on the same issues, and they partnered with us. And we created strategies that included ways for people to engage on a national level. So we would have like a week-long screening, a week of screenings, focusing on different communities. So if it was a film about the war, or like about Walmart, for example, that we did a few years ago, we would have one day dedicated just to faith communities organizing around the film. And that would be a whole day just of communities of faith that would use the film. And we created screening toolkits and discussion guides that were specific for that community. The next day it would be for labor, the next day it would be for women, the next day it would be for education. And this way we were able to draw large communities together on a national scale. Our goal was not only to educate and engage people, but also to create a sense of community around our films. It's something that we found over and over again, that as much as we now in the new world of we're all on our computers and Facebook and PDAs, people still have a sense that they want to be part of a community, and that we are empowered by being part of a community. And film is a great, I call it the gateway drug. It's the way to get people in. It's a way to get them excited, and then we can do, you know, what we... You've had experience with both, and so I wanted to ask you how you incorporate that in the distribution of your film and in building the community around your film.
I think it is a peer-to-peer sort of action center. And I mean, one of the great things that's happened since we launched NIOT.org is that people can get these stories very quickly. But Not in Our Town is a group of communities that have been active for quite a while. And we first gathered them in 2006, and that was sort of the impetus for building NIOT.org. We realized that we had to share out these stories. So, you know, I think it's a combination of, you know, spreading out the videos. And they said to us, you have to continue to tell the stories. So that's what they demanded of us. Please continue to tell the stories and to film them and to put them up so that we can have them. It's really important for us to have that launch pad of discussion and that storytelling. And, you know, now I think the fact that it's accessible online is really, really important. People can get them instantly. And we saw that in, you know, the whole Fred Phelps marching across the country taking action. People would, you know, would quickly see it. So Stanford saw it, what Rutgers Hillel did, and used it on their campus. And then when the people in San Francisco saw what happened in Palo Alto, they used it. And when the people in West Virginia saw what happened in San Francisco, they sort of built on it. You know, I think that's really
replicating models.
Replicating and building on them, because I'm so excited about the latest response to Fred Phelps, dancing flash mobs, which came out seriously in West Virginia. That was so cool. And they got it from the sort of musical response of the kids in San Francisco and Palo Alto, and they took it to the community.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Oops, go
ahead. Can we go here first and then we'll go there? Thank you.
Yeah, I had a question for Patrice. Congratulations on your viral response on Facebook. I think that's wonderful. But I wonder if you could share with us how you drove people initially to Facebook for that viral response to happen.
Really interesting, because we weren't paying much attention to it because we hadn't built the Facebook Connect thing yet, and we're like, oh, what if we get everybody to go on Facebook and they won't go to Not in Our Town? Wrong, 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 wrong. And so we had about 700 members, and then we did a concerted push, and so within like a month and a half, 2 months, we got up to almost like 4,500, 5,000. I don't know where we are now, but it was like really, because it sort of reinforced itself and built on itself. And we went to our audience and we asked them, we go, okay, we really want to build out this site on Facebook. We want you to help us. Will you do it? And they did it. And then, you know, I think, you know, offering them assets and continually putting stories up, right? So it wasn't just, hey, this is what we're doing. It was like, hey, look at this film. What do you think? Will you spread it? And so the storytelling became really part of it. And, you know, sort of getting local communities, when we tell their story, then we'd say, you know, tell your friends and get them on Facebook. So we went to our community and asked them to engage in this.
And I want to just add to that, on projects that I've worked on, we oftentimes will use our Facebook. We ask our fans, members, likes, whatever they're called now, to come to us with their own stories. So we'll do a variety, kind of share your story, share your photo, share your video of your own experience. And that, you know, anything like that really generates a lot of attention and usually grows exponentially into your community, because you've got people coming back because they want to see what's the next story, what's the next video, what's the next picture that somebody else has shared about it in their own town, not just so that they can see somebody else's, but most people are going there so that they can learn and then do it themselves. So a lot of user-generated kinds of work on any of the social networking platforms is a really good way to grow the community. Now we can go back there.
You guys have shared so much information about the dissemination of the film. So, quite frankly, something we filmmakers usually aren't very good about. You know, if we get our funding and we make the film, often we're at least pleased about that. But as we go into this new world you talk about with partnering and with strategies, even in pre-production, and I know you've all spoken in one way or another about you keep yourself separate as a storyteller from advocacy necessarily, but it seemed like in some of our conversation we're getting kind of close to, you know, are we an advocate or are we principally telling the principal story, you know, separate from being an advocate because we love these people, we love the community. Is that difficult sometimes to keep it separate, that you principally really are telling the story, or are you principally the advocate, or is it all mixed up? I wanted to ask that question.
Did you have that for somebody specific, or do you want me to choose? I think that's a good one for Debra.
We're advocates and filmmakers, I guess. We're a little bit of both. I mean, I think, like what I was saying about having empathy for your subject matter, for me as a filmmaker, like I throw myself all the way into it. So I think that, yeah, there is that. I will usually be an advocate and a filmmaker at the same time. I don't know if I need to draw the line through that, but I think storytelling-wise, I mean, I think there, you know, obviously there's the objectivity aspect of it, but I think having empathy just enriches the whole story. That's just.
I think Patrice also has something to add.
Well, I'm a journalist, and I'm very proud about being a journalist, but I'm a documentary filmmaker, but I also intentionally make films and tell stories that will spur action. And we don't use the word advocate. There's nothing wrong with it, and it's not that we reject it, but that's not exactly what we do because we're not prescriptive in that way. We tell stories and then, you know, sort of let people create their own way of doing it, and we're sort of like the story carriers for this movement. So it's really a little bit different. That's the distinction that I make, is that I'm not saying, here's your blueprint for social action. It's like, you know, boom, boom, boom. I mean, we provide that, but it doesn't emanate from us. It comes from the communities, and it's generated in that way. So it's a little bit, I think.
Did we have more questions over here? He asked you. Okay, I'm going to actually. Oh, okay. Go ahead. Microphone. I'm going to expand on that right for 1 second before the microphone comes. Only in that back to what you were also part of the question in decision making, and Meg pointed it out a little bit. In the editorial decisions in the early part of the film, a lot of times what we've done is include people that we know are going to be instructive and are advocates in those areas that are then going to lead people to their organizations. We call them distribution partners, but they also help us to make editorial decisions about the film, knowing that if we're highlighting their story, they're going to help us get the issue out in a way that allows us to be filmmakers and allows us to highlight the advocates.
Hi, this is a question for Debra. Given that the community that you work in is changing so rapidly, what do you feel is the future utility for the film and the context for the films that you're making with these youth? And then secondarily, if the youth are going to be displaced, moved to a different community, how do you envision this group of youth coming together in the future, or do you?
Well, the youth, let's see, as far as, what was the first part of the question? I'm sorry, just brief.
Given that the community is changing and becoming gentrified,
right.
What do you feel is the future context for the films you are all making?
Well, for this film, because as we know, if we live in America, it's happening in most major urban areas. I was just at the lunch roundtable talking to some folks about what's going on in Chicago, similarly in Cabrini Green, where they're knocking those projects down and gentrifying that area, and same here in Washington, D.C., where they've gentrified areas and pushed out African-American people. I think that our goal is to be able to distribute the film to other communities that are facing the same issues and just raise the questions, raise the discussion, and really stimulate dialogue around it. So, and right now, showing the film in San Francisco, it's right in the middle of the process and is generating a lot of questions from the community. And right now, they're having a candidate supervisor forum for District 10, which is the Bayview, and they're showing the film and they're generating discussion among supervisor candidates so that they can talk about our, and kind of, because the film is really personal and emotional from a point of view of youth, it kind of helps to pull on the emotions versus get all brain, and really, help reveal what these young people are going through. And I think it kind of shifts the discussion a little bit from political to real human feelings. And then the second part of the question is that our youth they continue to work together. It's just the nature of the urban landscape right now that's changing. But I think that the youth that develop the relationships over the course of making the film will have continued to work together in different ways. They've graduated from my program, but they've all continued to make films or music videos or work on short projects, and they've stayed in touch to work together.
I believe we've been given the final notice, so I'm going to ask the panelists if they can just stay and be available afterwards, and I'm going to ask Allison if each can have 30 seconds to close. Okay, so Patrice?
There's so much power in this room. I can't believe the people, the power you have, the connections you have, and I'm asking you to think about contributing to NIAT.org, a story on our Who Cares video campaign, something, because the fight against hate belongs to all of us. Now I sound like a big advocate. Well, I guess. But I really hope you will contribute, and I'd love to see your stories on NIAT.org.
And Meg?
I don't really have a plug, but I'm definitely interested in talking afterwards if people have suggestions about some of our things that we were talking about in terms of distribution.
I guess mine is just about community being the gatekeeper to neighborhood storytelling and respect for that.
I just want to thank everybody for your attention and thank my panelists.